All right, happy Thanksgiving. So I'm out here in Wallace, Idaho, where I really feel a sense of belonging because I don't seem to feel as judged about being single as I do back home in Seattle or back in New York, where I lived for a few months, or even in Rochester, New York. I mean, I was going to school when I was in Rochester, so maybe that wasn't such a big deal. But in a work environment in Rochester, I bet it would be also pretty brutal. Um, but I want to mention something I noticed about children of recent times. So I'm a private tutor, so I work with a lot of kids from, I would say, 8 or 9 years old up until their early teens. And one of the most frustrating things I run into nowadays is that so many kids have everything handled for them that they have no idea about the real life. So, for example, my favorite one was this guy. I think he was 16 or 17 years old, and I was giving him an example of how to read a chart. I think it was in AP Physics, how to read. I remember it was vapor pressure, and he comes from a different culture, so maybe they draw their charts a little differently. I don't know, but I was explaining. Imagine this is the stock market, and it's going, and he has no idea what the stock market is. And I say, okay, how about you know how the price of gasoline goes up and down, and he didn't know that the price of gasoline could change from one day to another. And but that wasn't the only that was the most shocking one, I think. But I routinely run into this. Right, people don't know. For example, I try to use real life examples when I teach, right? Uh, and people have no idea how to wash their clothes, right? Like, for example, how much detergent do you add per how much water? And they have no idea what I'm talking about. And this is one reason why I don't want to have children, is because there's so much paranoia nowadays about letting your children handle anything, and I bet I would have problems with that too. My parents did that to me as well. Fortunately, I was rebellious enough to not go along with it, but when I was living with my parents, my mom used to have trouble waking me up in the morning to go to school. Uh, Come to think of it, I don't have trouble waking up in order to do anything unpleasant or pleasant or anything, right? In fact, it's the exciting events that I often oversleep for, right? Because I get too excited. But I used to get into huge arguments with my mom about waking up. And now I just wake up. Even if I only got 2 hours of sleep like the other day, I just wake up. And sometimes I have to go to work in my sleep almost. The other day I had a tutoring client. It was all online. And somehow I did it, even though I thought I had slept through the whole thing. But see, if I were living with my mom, it would never happen that way, right? My mom would get nervous about me missing work. She would come to my bedroom to scream, and then I might even miss it, right? Instead of just working in my sleep, right? And my mom always complains that I don't do the chores around the house. And then one time I asked my mom, because at this point I had moved out of my parents' home for about 3 years. I say, Mom, if I never clean up, right, like you mentioned, or I never dress properly, I think I would have been kicked out of school by now. I certainly, uh, at the time I had a girlfriend. How do you think I would get a girlfriend if I had handled chores the way you think I do? I mean, my mom is sometimes very nervous about some of these things. She sees dishes that need to be done, and she does it, and then she complains, right? And so I try to put a positive spin on it. So my mom always is looking to get some more exercise, right? And I tell her, let's put it this way. I've lived alone. I've lived alone for 3 years. I've never run into trouble like that. Um, and if you insist on washing the dishes because you could get some exercise, I wish you well, right? At the time, my mom had type 2 diabetes. I said, I wish you well if you need to get some exercise. But let's try to keep it well and not get angry after that, because that might negate some of the benefits of getting exercise, right? That's how I put it, if I remember correctly. And she accepted it for 2 days, and then she forgot. And she started complaining again, and I had to give her the same lesson over and over and over every 2 days, if I remember correctly. And I don't think I'm immune to that problem. If I had kids, I would probably worry too much for them as well. I don't think she was doing it to complain. I think she was worried that how I would handle it when I went back to Rochester at the time, right? But I do things very well, but I do them very well my way, right? And sometimes people don't see it that way, especially my parents, right? My grandparents also don't see it that way. See, my grandparents live in Taiwan, and every time I go home to Taiwan, they're very worried about me. Hopefully I won't do this again, but I used to have very, very big binge eating kind of problems. Now the problem is I actually binge eat more when people are making noise about it, because I'm not getting the enjoyment out of it anymore, right? If I binge eat and I get the enjoyment out of it, at least I can move on and go take a walk in Taiwan, right? But my grandmother makes so much noise that it completely ruins the enjoyment of it, which means that I probably have to do it again and again and again and again, right? And so 2 years ago, I finally bit the bullet and decided to stay in a hotel by myself, and I ate much more reasonably. I mean, at the time, it was still a lot compared to how I'm handling my eating disorder nowadays, but at the time, it was a major improvement. But good luck trying to explain that to my grandmother, right? I don't blame her for it. It just has to be done that way, right? Besides, I got to mingle with some other people when I stayed alone anyhow, so you get the idea, right? The good news is that my grandparents, they recently downsized their apartment anyhow, right? So it's not like it was a bad idea for me to stay alone. But that's exactly why I don't want to have children. Here in Wallace, I don't seem to get judged as much for it. Another thing I realized from this whole COVID-19 crisis, at the beginning of the lockdown, our governors and President Trump, they all started by saying we're going to lock down for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks at most, right? Nobody said it was going to be the whole year or even a decade, right? That we might have extra restrictions. And I think there's a good reason for that, right? They wanted us to focus on the next 2 weeks, next 3 weeks. And it made me realize maybe I should guard what I tell people, right? For example, even the fact that I'm single maybe shouldn't be so broadcasted out there. That's a tough one, because at the same time, I love to do things that singles do. Maybe the fact that some of my personal hobbies, maybe I could guard that a little bit tighter, right? I recently took on a client for tutoring, and it's online right now. And when I meet up with the clients, let's say it's at their home, I gotta be careful about certain things, right? I have allergies, and the client I was negotiating with said, why don't we start online, and then when things are a little safer, let's meet at our home. And I almost said that, well, I have allergies to fragrances. I don't know if that's going to work out. But then I realized, the online part's not going to be a problem anyhow. Let's do that first. Let's kick the job out of the park. And then if I have to go to their home, bring it up then, right? It made me realize that you don't have to say anything that you don't need to say at the moment, right? It can wait, right? Anyways, happy Thanksgiving. I want to show that one can have fun as a single guy on Thanksgiving as well, because there seems to not be a whole lot of coverage. Everybody's talking about missing their family members, and I'm talking about missing going to some of my favorite vacation destinations, and I wish they were more equal, right? I think the majority of adults nowadays are single anyhow, right? I don't know why they get so little coverage. I think the problem is that singles don't bond together very well, right? You got families who have friends with other families. Singles don't stick together very well. There's a lot of competition, if you will. There's also a lot of differences. Anyways, I'll leave that for another time. All right, happy Thanksgiving.